My wife enjoys seeing me teach and hears me talking about the Holocaust all the time. On our wedding anniversary, being a smart husband, I opted to push something this week. So thank you for everyone for your indulgence. Also, I wanted to, in watching, I realized I've given you two different facts, so I want to correct myself, always willing to acknowledge I made a mistake. So I correctly said 3 weeks ago that Dachau and concentration camps started within 60 days of Hitler coming to power in 1933, and 2 weeks ago I said 1934. So I just want to put it on the record that it is in fact in 1933 that we already see concentration camps coming into existence. Today is an interesting class talking about our understanding of resistance. And I'm just going to pull up some notes here. It's an interesting subject because oftentimes we think of resistance in only a kinetic way, fighting. And all too often the Holocaust is described, or Jews rather, described as going as sheep to the slaughter, and that Jews didn't fight. And typically if we do hear about fighting, we hear, oh, that's right, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, there they fought, but nowhere else. And what does it mean to resist? And so today I wanted to spend time talking a little bit about resistance and what resistance can look like and what I think that it means in terms of, is it just fighting or is it just surviving? Because a lot of times the choices that people faced were choiceless choices. As a survivor of Treblinka said, do I die in the camp? Do I die as a Sonderkommando? Do I die fighting? If I must die, let me die on my own terms. And it's a big way to think about is that resistance. We heard or talked in a recording from Emanuel Ringelblum's Oneg Shabbos, a group that we'll talk a little bit more about today, about who will record our history, which is a great movie and a book, how people, even on one of the milk cans, for example, that was discovered after the war, someone wrote just their name. I existed. Is that a form of resistance? Was writing and keeping a journal a form of resistance? I would suggest to you, yes. So we're going to paint a few different scenarios and talk about, and hopefully, and you can leave your mics open if you have a comment along the way, because I will have a few questions. And so here we go. I'll share my screen. And present. Okay. So the story we're going to talk about today is about two men who were tasked with the unthinkable. Inside of the ghettos, the Nazis placed what was called a Judenrat, a Jewish council, to oversee and manage the day-to-day operations of the ghetto. They had that challenge of trying to make the best of a horrible situation while also having to comply with the orders of the Nazis. No small feat, to be sure. But how these men went about it was very different. So the question I would ask first is how do we make choices when it's a choiceless choice? On a regular, reoccurring basis, the ghettos were required to start delivering inhabitants to go to the train station, the Umschlagplatz, and be shipped to the east for resettlement. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Send me your sick. Send me your old. If you don't do it, we'll do it. We'll find someone else who does. Adam Chernyakhov was highly regarded in the ghetto. He was someone who opened soup kitchens, tried to tax those that were wealthy to try to ensure that the children that were dying on the street could survive. He helped organize and find ways to try to protect children that were able to smuggle food in and out of the ghetto, those that were able to survive the ghetto. In fact, by most metrics, people were able to survive because of children, putting children in harm's way, who would go over the wall, under the wall, through the wall to smuggle food from the Polish side. If we think about calories, the next time you ever pick up a candy bar, and the average candy bar, there's, I don't know, 180, 240, maybe 280 calories, something like that. The amount of food rationed and allowed into the Warsaw Ghetto was 180 calories per person per day. On the Polish side of the wall, the rations were 1,500 calories.
Sorry, Randy, I think you froze for a second there.
Oh, did I? Oh, here we go again with the internet issues. I apologize. So, what did you hear last?
1,500 calories.
Got it. Perfect. So 1,500 calories. And then the next question and if you were a German, you had anywhere between, usually around 3,000 calories that were allotted to you. So there was no way to survive unless food was brought in, smuggled in. So Adam Chernyakhov did everything he tried to do to make the best of a bad situation, provide labor. He would sometimes try to negotiate, lessen the blow, if you will, when there was a demand to send Jews to the Umschlagplatz. We also know that the Nazis would use subterfuge. At one point, they say, please, if you volunteer to be resettled in the East, you'll receive 3 loaves of bread and some jam. Which, of course, some people did. They went because they were so hungry, and that train headed to Treblinka, where they were murdered. Chaim Rumkowski, same scenario, the other largest ghetto. And I put Krakow, that's incorrect. It was the Lodz Ghetto, so I apologize for my own error. And in the Lodz Ghetto, Chaim Rumkowski is told the same thing. Now, Chaim Rumkowski was much more combative with the Nazis in terms of going back and forth. He constantly argued with the Nazis and said, the ghetto, we recognize it's a labor force. And if you kill too many of us, it's going to impact your ability to get product from us, because we are producing various products for the war effort. And you can't take away X number of workers. And it's okay if you take some of the old people, they're not great workers. So he was not held in high esteem in the Lodz Ghetto. But both of these men at a certain point in time are faced with the same question. Give me your children, me being the Nazis. A choiceless choice. And they both responded in 2 very different ways. What would you do? Do you comply with an order of the Nazis? Because after all, you're a Jew and these are your people, and you should be the one with at least some form of rachamim to try to bring these children to their end? Or do you try to start a fight, a rebellion, knowing that thousands in your care will die? Or do you kill yourself and say, there's nothing left for me to do because they are asking me to do the impossible? So first, I will tell you it's a dramatic reading of Rumkowski's choice.
be? One, take one.
A grievous blow has struck the ghetto. They are asking us to give up the best we possess. The children and the elderly. I was unworthy of having a child of my own, so I gave the best years of my life to children. I've lived and breathed with children. I never imagined I would be forced to deliver this sacrifice to the altar with my own hands. In my old age, I must stretch out my hands and beg. Brothers and sisters, hand them over to me. Fathers and mothers, give me your children. Yesterday afternoon, they gave me the order to send more than 20,000 Jews out of the ghetto, and if not, we will do it. So, the question became, should we take it upon ourselves, do it ourselves, or leave it to others to do? Well, we, that is I and my closest associates, thought first not about how many will perish, but how many is it possible to save? We reached the conclusion that however hard it would be for us, we should take the implementation of this order into our own hands. I must perform this difficult and bloody operation. I must cut off limbs in order to save the body itself. I must take children, because if not, others may be taken as well. God forbid. I have no thought of consoling you today, nor do I wish to calm you. I must lay bare your full anguish and pain. I come to you like a bandit to take from you what you treasure most in your hearts, and I have tried, using every possible means, to get the order revoked. I tried, when that proved to be impossible, to soften the order. Just yesterday, I ordered a list of children aged 9. I wanted at least to save this one age group, the 9 to 10-year-olds. But I was not granted this concession. On only one point did I succeed, in saving the 10-year-olds and up. Let this be a consolation to our profound grief. There are in the ghetto many patients who can expect to live only a few days more, maybe a few weeks. I don't know if the idea is diabolical or not, but I must say it. Give me the sick. In their place, we can save the healthy. And common sense dictates that the saved must be those who can be saved and those who have a chance of being rescued, not those who cannot be saved in any case. We live in the ghetto. We live with so much restriction that we do not have enough even for the healthy, let alone for the sick. Each of us feeds the sick at the expense of our own health. We give our bread to the sick. We give our meager ration of sugar, our little piece of meat, and what's the result? Not enough to cure the sick, and we ourselves become ill. Of course, such sacrifices are the most beautiful and noble, but there are times when one has to choose. Sacrifice the sick, who haven't the slightest chance of recovery, and who also may make others ill or rescue the healthy. I could not deliberate over this problem for long. I had to resolve it in favor of the healthy. In this spirit, I gave the appropriate instructions to the doctors, and they will be expected to deliver all incurable patients so that the healthy who want and are able to live will be saved in their place. I must tell you a secret. They requested 24,000 victims, 3,000 a day for 8 days. I succeeded in reducing the number to 20,000, but only on the condition that these be children under the age of 10. Children 10 and older are safe. Since the children and the aged together equal only some 13,000 souls, the gap will have to be filled with the sick. I understand you, mothers. I see your tears, all right. I also feel what you feel in your hearts, you fathers who will have to go to work in the morning after your children have been taken from you, when just yesterday you were playing with your dear little ones. All this I know and feel. And since 4 o'clock yesterday, when I first found out about the order, I've been utterly broken. I share your pain. I suffer because of your anguish. I don't know how I'll survive this, where I'll find the strength to do so. I can barely speak. Help me carry out this action. I am trembling. A broken Jew stands before you. This is the most difficult of all orders I have ever had to carry out at any time. I reach out to you with my broken, trembling hands and beg, give into my hands the victims, so that we can avoid having further victims, and a population of 100,000 Jews can be preserved. So they promise me. If we deliver our victims by ourselves, there will be peace. I understand what it means to tear off a part of the body. So, which is better? What do you want? That 80,000 to 90,000 Jews remain? Or God forbid that the whole population be annihilated? You may judge as you please. My duty is to preserve the Jews who remain. I do not speak to hotheads. I speak to your reason and conscience. One leaves the heart of a bandit to ask from you what I am asking. But put yourself in my place. Think logically. And you'll reach the conclusion that I cannot proceed any other way. The part that can be saved is much larger than the part that must be given away.
Chaim Rumkowski gives this speech in a big square. Thousands are in attendance. As he goes through his speech, you can hear and imagine women screaming, falling to their knees, shouting no at him. Chaim Rumkowski carries out the ask of the Nazis in the hopes of saving, as he put it, what remains. He continues making deportations, 5,000, 10,000, and ultimately the Lodz Ghetto is liquidated. Here are words by Renia Bristone talking about Adam Chinanakov. who was faced with the same choice.
There was Chinanakov. Chinanakov was the head of the Jews in Warsaw. He was a very good person.
Did you know him personally?
I didn't know him personally, but we knew about him in the ghetto that he was a good person. And I think this was in 41. And there were corn and hell in the ghetto. There were also some important Jews which worked with the Germans. My father gave them a sum of money to bring my mother and my brothers to smuggle to Warsaw. And suddenly it was in Warsaw when it started the Judenrein, and they started to send to Poniatów and to Travnik and to Treblinka. They started to send the Jews. So and it was that it was in the newspapers that Chinanakov has to, for this and this date, they want so many Jews to send away, and they asked for the old folks home and for the children which have no parents, orphans, and for the sick. Those were people that they didn't want to feed, you know. And so my father thought that it's useless to bring now my mother and we ran. This was on Leshna Street, where that Conan Heller had his office, and we were going to ask back for the money. We don't want them to come here because it looks like they're gonna destroy us all now. They're gonna send us all away. And in the same office, Chinanakov had next to Conan Heller his office, and we came running in the morning with my father to do it fast, you know, to get our money back fast. And here we see the doors open, and we saw Chinanakov laying dead on the floor. Apparently he committed suicide. He couldn't, it wasn't such a bad situation. He couldn't give the orphans to death, and he took poison and he committed suicide.
How did you feel about that when you saw it?
We felt terrible. We saw this is the end of us all now. I mean, in fact, it was like that every day. They wanted more people, more people. There was
Adam Chinanakov writes two letters. He writes a letter to his wife, and he writes a letter to the inhabitants of the ghetto that says they demand that with my own hands I should kill my nation's children. There is nothing for me to do but die. On Wednesday, July 22nd, 1942, around 6 p.m., less than an hour after making a note in his diary, Adam Chinanakov closes the door of his office and took potassium cyanide. To this day, we do not know the exact circumstances of his death. On the table, he left the letter for his wife, Felicia. And his full note is about the demand of a transport of children, and that it's the last straw. Surely I cannot send to death the defenseless children. I decided to leave. Do not treat it as an act of cowardice or escape. I am helpless. My heart is bursting with grief and pity. I cannot stand it anymore. My deed will show truth to all and may lead to the right course of action. I realize that I leave you with a heavy legacy. Worth noting that Adam Chinanakov's diary survives the war. It is a part of everything that is encapsulated within the Oneg Shabbat archives that are found after the war. And similar to the Lodz Ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto is ultimately liquidated. Two very different men trying to resist in their own way in the face of a choiceless choice. So about the Oneg Shabbat, here's a little bit about when the archive was found. It is in Hebrew with English subtitles.
יוני 1946, חורבות ורשה ההרוסה. ממעמקי אדמת הגטו היהודי נמצאות כמה תיבות פח חתומות, ובהן ארכיון הגטו הנקרא עונג שבת. כותב אני את צוואתי בעת גירוש יהדות ורשה. כמעט ואיבדנו כל קשר עם חברינו. כל אחד פועל על דעת עצמו. איש איש לפי יכולתו מנסה להציל את עצמו. נותרנו שלושה, החבר ליכטנשטיין, גז'בץ' ואני. החלטנו לכתוב צוואות, לאסוף מעט חומר על פעולות הגירושים ולהטמינו באדמה. שומה עלינו למהר, כי לא יודעים מה תלד השעה. אתמול עבדנו בזה עד שעות הלילה המאוחרות. את הארכיון המחתרתי ייסד ההיסטוריון דוקטור עמנואל רינגלבלום באוקטובר 1939. פגישות הקבוצה נערכו בשבת, ולכן נקרא שמה מטעמי סודיות, עונג שבת. מעשיו של היהודי בביתו לא עניינו את הגרמנים. ואכן היהודים התחילו לכתוב. הכל כתבו, עיתונאים, סופרים, מורים, אנשי ציבור, נוער ואפילו ילדים. רובם רשמו יומנים, תיארו את מאורעות היום בפריזמה של חוויות אישיות. נכתב הרבה מאוד, אלא שרוב רובו של כל זה עבד עם גירוש והשמדת יהודי ורשה. נותר רק החומר שהוסתר בארכיון הגטו. רינגלבלום פעל מתוך הבנה עמוקה שהארכיון ייוותר כעדות יחידה לגורל יהודי פולין בכלל וורשה בפרט. הוא הבין שהתיעוד חייב להיות רחב והעסיק עשרות מתעדים שעסקו במרבית תחומי החיים בגטו. רב צדדיות הייתה העיקרון הראשי של עבודתנו. האובייקטיביות הייתה העיקרון המנחה השני. שאפנו לכך שהאמת כולה תשתקף בה, מרה ככל שתהיה. התיעוד שלנו נאמן, ללא איפוי. אישור מסירת חפצים, וסר בלומה, רחוב מורנובסקה 6 דירה 15. וסר מסרת צווארון ושני כיסי פרווה. תעודת זהות זקשטיין גלה, ציירת. התעודה בתוקף עד 15 ביוני 1947. תעודת חיסון נגד טיפוס. תעודת עבודה הרב שמעון הוברבנד, מהמתעדים המרכזיים בארכיון עונג שבת.
לפני המלחמה גרתי ברחוב נובוליפקי 40. היה לנו טוב מאוד. ב-1 בספטמבר 1939 פרצה המלחמה. מאז הפסקתי ללכת לבית הספר. אחרי זמן מה לקחו את אבאלה למחנה עבודה, ומאז התחיל להיות לנו רע. אבאלה נמצא כבר במחנה עבודה שנה אחת. גברת אחת מוועד הבית העבירה אותי למעון יום. אני מקבלת 4 פעמים ביום אוכל, ואני נמצאת בהשגחה טובה מאוד. שיינברג.
בכוונה נמנענו מלגייס לעבודה עיתונאים מקצועיים. שאפנו לכך שהמאורעות העוברים על העיירה, חוויותיו של היהודי, יתוארו בצורה פשוטה ונאמנה ביותר. מילה מיותרת, תוספת צבע או איפוי ספרותי, היו משאירים טעם תפל וצורמים את האוזן. כה עשירים בטרגדיות עם חיי היהודים במלחמה, שכל המוסיף גורע. בספטמבר 1941 נערך מבצע חיטוי המוני ברחוב קרוחמלנה. הרחוב הזה היה משכן של דלות זוהמה והברחות. סיפר לי אחד מעדי הראייה שיום אחד הוא היה נוכח כאשר הסניטר הגרמני קלוש מצא ליד אחד הבתים ברחוב קרוחמלנה גופת ילד שהייתה מונחת שם לפחות 4 או 5 ימים. קלוש, בנקמן וקלר החלו לשבור שמשות בדירות הקרקע ולבדוק מאין השליחו את הגופה. הם נכנסו לאחת הדירות ושם נתקלו באדם שוכב על הרצפה. קלר חבט בפניו כמה פעמים בעלה, באומרו שהוא רוצה להיווכח האם האיש חי או מת. הם החלו להכות זקנה שהייתה באותה דירה, ושאלו אותה מדוע היא מחזיקה גוויות בדירתה, על אף שהיא נשבעה כי רק לפני שעה דיברה עם שני הנפטרים. העגלון ממורנובסקה, בר אייזנשטט, הסיע לעגלתו מוצרים שונים. בזמנו היה מביא טקסטיל לנלבקי ולגנצ'ה, אור לפנסקה, פח לגז'יבובסקה. אחר כך כשבאו הגירושים, הוא הסיע ארונות, מיטות, ספות, שולחנות, ואת כל דלת העם היהודי. היום הוא ה-23 בנובמבר 1941. בר אייזנשטט בן 42, בפעם הראשונה מסיע משהו שעליו כלל לא חשב. הוא מסיע את גופתה של אשתו שנפטרה מרעב ומתשישות בדירת מרתף. במשך 3 ימים הוא התרוצץ לשווא בין מוסדות שונים כדי להשיג 20 זלוטי שהיו נחוצים לתשלום הקבורה. עכשיו, יחד עם בנו היחיד יוסלה בן 7, ומסיע את אשתו לבית הקברות. לאחר שקיבלתי הזמנה ממנהל הכלא, אני מחליט היום, 25 במאי 1942, שאני רוצה לראות במו עיניי איך חיים שם הפושעים הגדולים, אלה שנחטפו לפי צו הכובש בשל מעבר לצד השני, או שנתפסו משום שלא עמדו את סרט הזרוע. על החטאים האלה נדחסו בבית הכלא של הגטו 600 בחורים, מתוכם כ-500 ילדים בני 10 עד 15. הילדים לא רצו למות מרעב וחמקו לצד הארי בעבור לחם. התנאים והיחס אליהם כל כך נוראים שהם כולם ימותו בכלא. אנחנו מבקרים בתאים, התפיסניקס כלואים דחוסים בהם. התנאים המקומיים הם פטאליים. באגף הנשים נמצאים תאים מיוחדים לאסירות אינטליגנטיות. הן לא מתלוננות. בשתיקתן יש כל כך הרבה מילים, כל כך הרבה סבל אנושי, שאני לא יכול לתארו בעתי. אנחנו הולכים מיטה לתא, רואים תמונות נוראיות. אנשים מצומקים ומיובשים, עיניהם עצומות. אוחז בירעד. אלה הם מתים חיים שמחכים למשהו, ואני לא יכול לצערי לעזור בכלום. בסוף אנחנו עומדים על פתח הגיהינום. הגיע זמן תשובה. הרי לא רשעים אנו. המלחמה שינתה את חיי היהודים בערי פולין במהירות רבה. יום אחד לא דמה למשנהו, והתמונות התחלפו במהירות של סרט קולנוע, ולכן כה חשוב היה לצלם כל אירוע בחיי היהודים ברגע התרחשותו, בעודו מפרפר ותוסס. גירוש, מתוך מחברת השירים של הילדה רחל הופנברג. רחלקה, בת 11.
פרץ גירוש כבד, פגע בהרבה אנשים. הכאב, העצב והייאוש שהאירו בלב היהודי. מלבד אלה שגורשו, הרבה אנשים נורו. הקהילה שלנו רימתה את עצמה כי היא הולכת לעבודה, אך המגורשים הלכו למותם. הגירוש הסתיים, הוא השאיר הרבה יתומים, שברים, עצב וייאוש.
גיטרמן האהוב. אני מתחנן, הצל אותי. זה עוד אפשרי. נלקחתי מהרחוב ועברתי לאומשלגפלץ. אני רוצה עוד לראות את אשתי ואת שני ילדיי הקטנים שהשארתי בפרובינציה. הצל אותי, קירמן. מר לנדאו, הרב בלומנפלד ומשפחתו נמצאים ברחוב סטבקי. הם מועסקים אצלך. אני מבקש להצילם כל עוד יש זמן.
הצוואה שלי, גלה זקשטיין. מה אני יכולה ברגע זה לומר ולדרוש, בעומדי על הגבול בין חיים ומוות, כשאני יותר בטוחה שלא אחיה מאשר כן אחיה, ברצוני להיפרד מידידיי ומעבודותיי. את עבודותיי אני תורמת למוזיאון היהודי, שיוקם בעתיד, כדי לשקם את חיי התרבות היהודית מלפני המלחמה עד לשנת 39. ללמוד על הטרגדיה הנוראה של הקיבוץ היהודי בפולין בזמן המלחמה. עכשיו אני רגועה, גורלי להיהרג. אני מנסה להחביא חלק מעבודותיי. אני רק רוצה זכר לשמי ולשם ביתי המוכשרת, מרגלית ליכטנשטיין. ב4 בנובמבר ילדתי את ביתי, זהו אושרי וגאוותי, היא מוצלחת, מוכשרת ויפה. הצער והכאב גדול, אם אשאר בחיים, יהיה זה למען ביתי האהובה. היו בריאים, חברים וידידים. היה בריא עם יהודי. אל תיתנו שחורבן כזה יתרחש שוב. גלה זקשטיין, 1 באוגוסט 1942, היום ה-14 של אקציית היישוב מחדש.
הפאביאק, בית כלא ששימש את הגרמנים בוורשה. ב7 במרס 1944 נתפסו עמנואל רינגלבלום, אשתו יהודית ובנם אורי, והובאו לפאביאק. הם נרצחו בחורבות הגטו ההרוס. אני סבור שעוד שנים לאחר המלחמה, כאשר כל סודות מחנות ההשמדה ייחשפו, עדיין תחלומנה אמהות אומללות שהילדים שנעקרו מזרועותיהן נמצאים אי שם במעמקי רוסיה, שעוד תתארגנה משלחות חקר לחיפוש אלפי המחנות שהיהודים הושמדו בהם. בתקופה הרחוקה כל כך מרומנטיקה, עוד תתרקם אגדה חדשה על מיליוני היהודים שנטבחו. אגדה זהה לאגדת 10 השבטים. יוני 1000.
So all of that writing of the Oneg Shabbat is considered resistance. A couple book references. The Auschwitz poems is some 500 pages of poems written in ghettos, in camps, mostly Auschwitz, but actually not entirely. Some in transit. using art as a way to express oneself, as a form of resistance and a reason to live. And resistance, of course, it's important to note, wasn't necessarily just Jewish resistance. In the Warsaw Ghetto, there was a Catholic church that remained inside the ghetto, the All Saints Church, and it's still there on Grabowski Square. And there was a Monsignor by the name of Godlewski. And Godlewski was what's the best way to describe him? He was an uber nationalist, had a nationally syndicated radio show before the war, talked about Poland being only for Poles. And basically, he could care less about the Jews. But while being inside of the Warsaw Ghetto, and it was his choice, because he wanted to serve the needs of the Catholics that had been caught up in the ghetto because perhaps they had a grandparent who was Jewish. Through his eyes of seeing persecution on a day-to-day basis, Monsignor Godlewski, who was arguably an anti-Semite before the war, becomes a part of the resistance and helps smuggle children out of the ghetto. In the Krakow Ghetto, another book suggestion, it's called The Krakow Ghetto Pharmacy. And it's the story of Tadeusz Pankiewicz. This is basically his diary that was published, survives the war. And he and his wife operate a pharmacy to the
it looks like both times they grabbed cash.
the fighting.
Sorry, Randy, you froze again.
So sorry. Where did I leave off? I apologize. Hello?
Sorry. Could someone else what was the last thing you heard?
Pharmacy.
Pharmacy.
Great, perfect. Sorry about that. So the Krakow Pharmacy about Tadeusz Pankiewicz. This was a non-Jewish couple that remains in the ghetto operating a pharmacy for the sole purpose of resisting the Nazis and helping to the best that they could, helping those inside the ghetto. The map that you see before you now, thinking about armed resistance, if you look at this map, you will see ghettos, labor camps, and extermination camps. And my guess is that you were not aware that there were this many armed resistance events, if you will, by Jews. And even thinking about why would be an interesting conversation, but because of time, we won't get into that. But I want to point out a few things. Number one, Warsaw. If we see here, we see that there was an uprising in Tarnów, Janowska. There was an uprising in Auschwitz. I'm not sure how many of you were aware of that. Sobibor, of course, we know. We've heard that. We've all most likely seen the movie. At Treblinka, believe it or not, there was an uprising. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about it. In October 14th in 1943, prisoners of Sobibor killed 11 SS guards and police auxiliaries and that had set up the camp, and they themselves set the camp on fire, and about 300 prisoners escaped, breaking through barbed wire, running through a minefield, and just over 100 are recaptured and later shot. At Treblinka, about 1,000 Jewish prisoners participate in a revolt in Treblinka on August 2nd in 1943. They had seized weapons that they could find, pickaxes, a couple firearms stolen from the camp armory. They too set Treblinka on fire. 200 managed to escape, though the vast majority of them are recaptured and killed. In Auschwitz, Alla Gertner. It's a pre-war photo of her in 1930s. Alla Gertner was a female prisoner who was working in the arms factory of Auschwitz, and upon being imprisoned, she takes it upon herself to organize women working in the munitions factories, and she decides through that organization that they will smuggle gunpowder and what they can. They will get it to the Sonderkommandos in operating the crematorium. And October 7th, 1944, the prisoners assigned to crematorium 4 rebelled because they had learned that they were going to be killed. Very typical is that a group of Sonderkommandos, the group that were responsible for operating the crematorium, they typically would work 4 to 6 months, then they would be killed, and then another group would be brought in to operate the crematorium. Also, actually, as a side note, Sonderkommandos were typically people who spoke an isolate language, so Greek, for example. So you could have a bunch of Greek Sonderkommandos, and they could be in a barrack next to a Pole, and they wouldn't be able to communicate. And he couldn't tell them what was happening. But anyway, this group of Sonderkommandos, thanks to the women, had learned that they were going to be killed, and they decided to rebel. The Germans crushed the revolt, murder almost all several hundred prisoners involved. But through that process, Crematorium 4 is destroyed and rendered inoperable by the Jewish uprising. We also know that there were Jewish partisans who fought within the Lithuanian forests, and there are other camp uprisings that take place at Kruzhna in 42, in Minsk in 43, Janovska in 43. Several dozen camp prisoners organized escapes to join partisan units. And we also know that from the Lipova street labor camp in Lublin, we also see uprisings. And just while we have a little time left, I do want you to watch this about fighters from the Warsaw Ghetto in their own words.
מה אמרנו אותו לילה ליהודים? אמרנו ליהודים אותה לילה, כל מי שיש לו נשק ביד יצא למלחמה, והיה כבר אז לא רק לארגון היהודי הלוחם נשק, אלא לסתם יהודים. כל מי שאין לו נשק, ילדים, נשים וטף, ירדו לבונקרים, ובהזדמנות הראשונה של אנדרמוסיה, של המלחמה שלנו, ילכו לצד הערים, יפרצו, ילכו ליער, חלק יישאר בחיים.
I belonged to a group. As I said, the head guy was Picker, handsome looking, 6 feet 2 inches tall, handsome looking blonde guy. He organized, from him I bought a gun. He went around to the rich Jews to get the money to buy ammunition. Because you see, the PPS, which means the Polish Socialist Party, was supposed to give us weapons as soon as we hang up a red flag on the tallest building of the ghetto. But they didn't show up through the canals. So actually we were fighting with nothing.
כשהתקרבו הגרמנים תחת העמדות שלנו ועברו בסך ואנחנו זרקנו את הפצצות והרימונים וראינו דם גרמני ניגר ברחובותיה של ורשה. אחרי זה שהרבה דם ודמעות יהודים ניגרו ברחובותיה של ורשה קודם לכן. שמחה גדולה, ולא היה חשוב מה יהיה מחר. שמחה גדולה הייתה בין הלוחמים היהודים. וראה זה פלא, הגיבורים הגדולים הגרמנים נסוגו בפחד עצום בפני הרימונים היהודיים והפצצות היהודיות מתוצרת בית. וראינו כעבור שעה איך שהקצין מדרבן חיילים לצאת לקרב, לאסוף את הפצועים, ואף אחד מהם לא זז, ועזבו את פצועיהם, שאחר כך אנחנו אספנו מהם את נשקם.
Trzeba było działać z zaskoczenia. I takśmy działali. Myśmy po tych 2 dniach wielkich tych walk, które były, co się mówi, że tam czołg spaliliśmy, to znaczy butelką za czołg, nie wiadomo czy spalony czy nie, ale w każdym razie palił się i takie różne rzeczy, to myśmy nie mieli takiej siły, żeby im się frontalnie przeciwstawić.
We killed a couple of Germans during the first or second day. Then they started 19th, and then don't remember exactly the date, but it was probably 25th, 26th of April 1943. Hormushko showed up. Imagine. How did he manage to come in? I don't know. He told me that he went through the sewage, through the help of the Polish underground and Polish army, at that time underground army. He came and he told me he's taking me out. I didn't want to go. We talked to all my friends and all told me that I'll be better alive than dead. I gave them my pistol, which I still have the same, a couple of rounds of ammunition and another, I believe, 2 bottles of Molotov cocktails, which are prepared and so on. I did not give them my cyanide. This I had on me, God forbid.
In this particular group, there was the commandant of our big group by the name of Shimon Heller. One of the messenger boys was running on the streets and was shot. So Shimon ran after him to pick him off the street and he was killed on the spot.
We heard those explosions, from tank explosions that we exploded tanks. They killed Germans, but the Germans weren't stupid. They sent in a lot of Ukrainians. So I used, of course, the hand grenade to blow up 4 of them. Ukrainians, they walked into an empty store and I threw the gun in.
We're running from post to post while the Germans were shooting down on the street. We could see them.
What was it like to see Jews fighting Germans?
I don't think that it was a question at that point of Jews fighting Germans. It was us not going without resistance.
אנחנו חשבנו שהם ימשיכו להיכנס ויהיה קרב פנים אל פנים, נהרוג כמה שנוכל, וידענו שבסופנו ברור לגמרי. אבל הם עשו את זה אחרת, הם נסוגו ועשו את מלאכת ההשמדה מבחוץ, ולזה לא היו לנו שום אמצעים. הגטו כעבור 3-4 ימים עמד בלהבות, אנשים נשרפו חיים.
Nie będziemy się wystawiać do przodu. Schowamy się w dzień, a w nocy będzie ich koniec. I tak przez parę dni było. Nie umiem tego dokładnie powiedzieć, na czym polegała to, że oni się nas bali. Bo myśmy mieli mało broni, myśmy mieli mało nabojów. Każdy nabój był, że tak powiem, na wagę złota. Ale jeden strzał, celny czy niecelny, płoszył całą grupę niemiecką. Bo oni uważali, że oni z tym robactwem, Żydami nie powinni ginąć. A to im się nie udało.
מוזר היה לראות את 20 וכמה בחורים ובחורות יהודיות עומדים מול האויב המחומש העצום הזה שמחים ועליזים. למה שמחים ועליזים? ידענו סופם יבוא. ידענו שהם ינצחו אותנו קודם, אבל ידענו שבת חיינו הם ישלמו מחיר יקר.
That lasted about a month and a half, and then I found myself facing fire and fire. The Germans surrounded the ghetto, and slowly, systematically, they were burning building by building. They brought in flamethrowers, and they were burning building one after another. There was no place to hide, because even if you had a bunker, the building would be burned, and the remnants of the building would fall on the cellar, and you would be buried alive. So in a situation like this, the Germans got me, and they put me in a convoy. I don't know why they didn't kill us, but they were many men in the convoy that were part of the resistance.
April 19th to May 16th, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And on April 23rd, 1943, final letter by Mordechai Anilevich, leader of the uprising, a 24-year-old, wrote the following. It is impossible to put into words what we have been through. One thing is clear. What happened exceeded our boldest dreams. The Germans ran twice from the ghetto. One of our companies held out for 40 minutes and another for more than 6 hours. The mine set in the brushmakers area exploded. Several of our companies attacked the dispersing Germans. Our losses in manpower are minimal. That is also an achievement. Yechiel fell. He fell a hero at the machine gun. I feel that great things are happening, and what we dared do is of great, enormous importance. Beginning from today, we shall shift over to the partisan tactic. 3 battle companies will move out tonight with 2 tasks, reconnaissance and obtaining arms. Do you remember? Short-range weapons are of no use to us. We use such weapons only rarely. What we need urgently, grenades, rifles, machine guns, and explosives. It is impossible to describe the conditions under which the Jews of the ghetto are now living. Only a few will be able to hold out. The remainder will die sooner or later. Their fate is decided. In almost all the hiding places in which thousands are concealing themselves, it is not possible to light a candle for lack of air. With the aid of our transmitter, we heard the marvelous report on our fighting by the Shavit radio station. The fact that we are remembered beyond the ghetto walls encourages us in our struggle. Peace go with you, my friend. Perhaps we may still meet again. The dream of my life has risen to become fact. Self-defense in the ghetto will have been a reality. Jewish armed resistance and revenge are facts. I have been a witness to the magnificent, heroic fighting of Jewish men in battle. Mordechai Anilevich. At Mila 18, where his command bunker was, just as the previous video shows, the survivor describes, the building which sits above their command bunker is burned to the ground and he's buried alive. It's 12:56, so I know we're running up on the end. I apologize for my screen freezing. And that was resistance in all forms. So many survivors in just surviving. There was a survivor who used to come, her name was Alice, and she was imprisoned at Auschwitz, and she had lost her baby sister. She actually handed her sister over to her mother and then watched them go and never saw them again. And when she inquired where they were, she was told at Auschwitz, look to the chimney. There they go, and soon you will too. And she had cried with one of her barrack mates and said, I just want to give up. I just want to throw myself against the electrified fence. And her friend made her promise. She said, you will not, Alice. You will survive. You must promise me you will never throw yourself against the wires. You will never give up. And amazingly, she kept her promise. and she survived. And the fact that she survived, in my opinion, was resistance. With that, I want to thank everyone. If there's comments, questions, let's see. Oh, there was just if anyone has a comment, a quick question before we wrap up, go right. Yes, Jennifer Malman.
Oh, hey, thanks so much, Randy. This was as painful as it was. We have to know this. I wondered if you could, just a minor detail. Remember how you opened this, as all of your sections, classes have been, this wonderful presentation. You named the two members of the Jewish Council. Who was there was Chinanakov. Who was the other one that began with an
Sure. His name is Chaim, first name, Rumkowski, Rumkowski, and he was the Lodz Ghetto. I had an error on my slide. It's
okay. Yeah.
Lodz.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments before we close it out?
It's wonderful.
Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for attending this class. A special, again, thank you to Wilshire Boulevard Temple and to Rabbi Nanis for inviting me to do this class. Next week, believe it or not, will be the last of this series about Holocaust legacy and where we go from here. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, you're always welcome to email further questions if you'd like, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you next week.
See you next week.